Support comes from Kenmore Air, offering escapes to the beautiful San Juan Islands this spring. Convenient daily 45-minute flights to San Juan Island, Orcas, and Lopez Islands from only $169 per person one way. Bookings available now at kenmoreair.com. Support comes from Pacific Science Center, celebrating spring at PacSci with butterflies at the Tropical Butterfly House, sea creatures in the saltwater tide pool, and Jane Goodall, Reasons for Hope at the IMAX Theater, a journey around the globe to share good news stories. Learn more at pacsci.org.
Imagine a world where the streets of downtown are filled with quiet, non-polluting buses that just whisper down the streets. To cross the Sound, you get on an electric ferry. You get to your work, and an AI has read all your emails for you.
You have 27 new emails asking why you are late.
Thanks. And all this is powered by renewable energy. Sounds great, right?
Right.
But there's a problem. All this takes a lot of energy. But what if we don't have enough of it?
Listen to me very carefully.
Look at that.
It's all going to turn off. It's going to turn off, and it will never, ever turn back on.
Blackouts may make good plot points for disaster movies, but they happen in real life too. And they're happening more often. It happened in Texas.
Millions still without power or water.
It happened in California.
We failed to predict and plan.
It could happen here too.
Seattle City Light preparing for a potential 45% increase in average demand for energy over the next 2 decades.
From KUOW in Seattle, this is Booming. I'm Monica Nicholsberg.
And I'm Joshua McNichols. We're banking on renewable sources of clean energy for the future. But in Washington state, the demand for power is surging faster than supply. So what's it going to take to keep the lights on? That's coming up next. But first, Monica, what have you been working on?
So the Seattle City Council is considering lowering its new minimum wage for food delivery drivers. This is just a few months after the minimum wage took effect.
Wow, that law didn't last very long.
No, and we should say this isn't a done deal, but it got my attention because it's pretty controversial. And also because I've been interested in the economics of the gig economy, companies like Uber and DoorDash that allow us to get stuff on demand using our phones, really since they launched.
Why is that?
Because these services that we've come to rely on, almost like infrastructure, haven't really proven to be viable business models. Some of the companies have never even made a profit.
Then how'd they get so big?
Well, they took 2 main shortcuts. One, they launched at a time when it was pretty easy to raise a lot of money from investors, so they could get really big while keeping the cost of their services really low, thanks to that investor money. They also don't have to pay for employee benefits because their workers aren't employees, they're independent contractors. By passing this minimum wage in Seattle, it really put that model to the test.
So why is the city council rolling it back then?
Well, they're under a lot of pressure from companies and restaurants who say the minimum wage is hurting business. Drivers seem kind of split. Some say that the higher pay makes up for fewer orders, but others say that they're making less money overall. And the companies themselves lobbied aggressively for this rollback. Since the gig worker minimum wage passed, they've added new fees to every order that literally say Seattle regulation fee. Altogether, these fees can be $10 to $15, not including tip, which doesn't make having a $7 sandwich delivered feel worth it every time.
No.
And this week, Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi said orders are down 45% in Seattle.
The regulation that has been in place in Seattle has clearly been poor regulation that has hurt the people that they're supposed to protect.
I can't help but think that this is political. I mean, Uber never liked this law, and Seattle now has a more conservative city council.
Yeah, I think that is a fair assessment. And, definitely one that workers' rights advocates would agree with. They say that if the city council was really looking at the interests of workers and all of the stakeholders, then they should be capping the fees that these companies charge, not worker pay.
Looking forward to what you report on that. Coming up next, for years, the Northwest has relied on cheap, abundant power, but things are going to get more complicated in the future and expensive. There are things we can do about it, and one solution was cleverly hidden in a 1980s cartoon about robots.
Your plan is a brilliant one, Majesty. We'll not only conquer the planet Eris, we'll be able to get rid of Zarkon as well.
That's after the break.
Introducing the Mercedes AA Class, the first fully electric luxury sedan powered entirely by AA batteries.
Joshua, last episode we talked about one thing that's driving our need for more power, the electric vehicle revolution, and how all those EVs need better batteries to keep them running longer. You've been reporting on why this is a big problem for everyone, not just for EV drivers. What have you found?
Well, this is way bigger than car batteries. I mean, they're basically the key to all of our future energy needs. We're going to have them in our cars and in our buses and in our ferries, but they're also going to be in our homes and our apartment buildings. Kind of like squirrels gathering acorns and hiding them in a tree. They're going to be sort of saving energy up for when we need it, because we're going to start using a lot more power, and that's going to stress out our electrical grid. There's this one study that estimates that in 20 years, Seattle is going to need 30 to 50% more power than it uses now. That's like if the city of Seattle gobbled up Tacoma and most of Everett.
That's crazy. Why are our power needs going to increase so much?
Because we're getting off fossil fuels. Utilities here are going to give up coal soon and natural gas a few years later. And then Washington State wants all new cars sold to be fully electric by 2030. After those changes, our electric grid is going to see loads like it's never seen before. Like when people arrive at home after work and they all plug their electric vehicles in at the same time.
It's kind of giving me images of when I try to dry my hair and do laundry at the same time, and it all just goes dark.
Yeah, exactly. That's perfect. And on top of that, the population is growing, and new users like AI, data centers, and cryptocurrency mining are slurping up more power every year.
That sounds like it is going to stress out our electrical grid.
Yes, it is. And in this new future, the supply of power and the demand for power often don't line up. We've seen this happen during heat waves and cold snaps.
Right now, tonight, high winds are knocking out power for thousands around the area. At last check, Puget Sound Energy is showing more than 14,000 homes without electricity.
Sometimes it's a disaster, like a fire, that creates the mismatch, when power sources or transmission lines are shut down. But other times it's just unprecedented demand.
And today, we were in one city where people were spending the hottest hours of the day without power.
Now, imagine it's a hot summer day, right? And the air is filled with wildfire smoke. Air conditioners are running full tilt. AI data centers are chugging on weather data, trying to predict when the smoke will go away. But solar panels can't generate as much power when the sun is blocked by smoke. This is just one example of how you can have a disconnect between supply and demand. Renewable resources all have this potential for this mismatch.
Yeah, and even if it's not an apocalyptic scenario, there's no solar power at night, right? When everybody plugs in their electric cars to charge.
Yes, and it's the same thing with wind. It only works when the wind blows. And hydropower, which historically it's been very dependable, but it could become less so. Climate change is making rainfall less reliable. And besides that, we have to save some water for the salmon.
Okay, so since it's hotter, we can't necessarily rely on a bunch of rain to fill up our rivers and then our dams?
Yeah, exactly. All these renewable energy sources are vital to the future, but if we want to make them work for us, we have to find a way to store that power so it's available when we need it, so we don't end up with blackouts because demand surges at the wrong time.
Okay, so in other words, we somehow have to adapt our power grid so that we have more electricity available than ever before, even though the sources of that power are going to be a lot less reliable. How are we supposed to do that?
Batteries.
Don't be fooled by commercials where one battery company's toy outlasts the others, because nothing outlasts the Energizer. They keep going and going.
Stop the bunny, please.
And going.
Batteries are one of the most important tools we have to prevent this kind of, blackouts and stuff. And we need a lot of them. I'm not talking about the batteries you may have in your drawer at home to power your flashlight. I'm talking about big rechargeable batteries, big enough to power whole cities.
Okay, can you give me a quick lesson in how a battery like that works?
Well, think of a battery as like a sponge for soaking up energy. And when you need more power out of it, you can squeeze it and get the power out. Not literally, of course. I mean, batteries are chemical rather than like physical things like a sponge, but you get the analogy. A small battery might fit in your cell phone, but a battery that could run the city of Seattle for 2 hours would fill the baseball stadium where the Seattle Mariners play.
Wow, that does not sound practical, not to mention the fire risk. That would be like building a bomb. Somebody's got to be working on a more reasonable solution.
Yeah, nobody's actually proposing a battery that big. But you bring up a good point about fire risk. I mean, anytime you've got concentrated sources of energy, there's always a fire risk. Scientists know that we need stronger and safer batteries, and there's a bunch of them working on that. Many of them in Washington state, right here. There's a whole battery revolution happening here in this state, as well as research on other renewable energy technology, like hydrogen and fusion. When I spoke to Washington Senator Maria Cantwell, she was almost giddy about this.
We are having this moment where these big forces are coming together and multiplying, if you will, the opportunities for the Northwest. So, it's coming. I'm not even sure we could stop it if we wanted to, all this innovation. It's coming.
I went to Woodinville, north of Seattle, to see one of these new battery companies in action. It's called Group 14. And they're developing batteries that are much smaller, but can store as much or more energy. So maybe you'd only need half a baseball stadium to hold a battery that would power Seattle, So there'd still be room to play ball.
That still seems like too big of a battery to me.
What I'm thinking is that maybe if we blocked off the whole outfield by filling it up with shipping containers full of batteries, then maybe the Mariners could actually start getting some home runs.
Ouch. They have been playing pretty well lately.
Okay. I got to get to a game. But these new batteries can charge much, much faster, too. Like you could charge an electric car in under 10 minutes. I mean, that's like the same amount of time almost that it takes to go to a gas station and fill up your car with gas.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I agree. The CEO, Rick Luby, showed me around this facility in Woodinville. It was all very secretive. Like, they wouldn't let me take photos of certain parts of the process since this is cutting-edge stuff. And the companies researching this are in a sort of race against each other, so they don't want to give away their secrets. He took me to this conveyor belt where they're cranking out one of the ingredients for this new kind of battery.
Down here, as the material comes out of the kiln system, you can look on the top here and get a peek at it. It really looks like you left the brownies in the oven too long. And, a black chunk of material comes out. That is actually probably the purest carbon in the world. And so this is the foundational material we use to make our silicon carbon composite.
Which you definitely don't want to eat. But the thing that they're doing that's unique is they're using silicon instead of graphite. And the reasons for that are too technical to get into here. But the big takeaway for you and me is that silicon is something that you can dig up just about anywhere on Earth. Most batteries use graphite instead, which mostly comes from China. And one of the big reasons there's such a push to develop a battery industry here is to reduce our dependence on China. China just dominates the battery industry. And if we ever got into a trade war with them, or God forbid, a real conflict, you can see how this could become a national security issue.
Yeah, it's interesting how it seems like foreign policy has been one of the biggest things to move the needle on some of these changes that we know we all need to make for, the climate. Are there other companies here that are working on this?
Yeah, in fact, there's a bunch of companies working on batteries in Washington state. They're mostly clustered around Moses Lake in eastern Washington.
And why is this all happening here?
Well, one of the main reasons is cheap hydropower. We've been talking about the energy that batteries provide, but it also takes a lot of energy to make batteries. Cheap energy has been a key reason for this region's economic growth since the first big hydroelectric dams were built here in the 1930s. That's why Moses Lake is the epicenter. It's right in the middle of the top 3 sources of energy in the state of Washington. There's the Grand Coulee Dam, there's the Chief Joseph Dam, and a nuclear power plant near Hanford. All of them are located right on the Columbia River.
Okay, so far we've been talking about the challenges with renewable energy and how a new industry making the next generation of batteries could help us transition to this greener future. But part of the reason that we have an energy shortage is that Washington State is a popular place to put data centers, right?
Yes, data centers. That is true. And they're also located near those power sources in central Washington.
Yeah, this is something I've covered, how the AI revolution makes it a lot harder for companies like Microsoft to keep their promises to get off fossil fuels. It's kind of mind-boggling when you learn how much power is needed to run these AI systems. One researcher told me that the energy needed to answer the questions people ask ChatGPT could power 30,000 homes a day.
Wow.
And ChatGPT's only gotten more popular since then.
Yeah. I'm guessing none of these AI makers are ever going to say, okay, we can stop improving this now. The AI is good enough, smart enough.
No chance.
Yeah, they're going to make it more sophisticated, and that'll require more power. This could end up having a big impact on our power supply here in Washington State. Listen to this.
What we're starting to see now is large blocks of load coming in, server farms, microchip fabrication plants, and they're coming in very large loads. Some of them a quarter the size of the city of Seattle would be one server farm just landing. And so that requires a lot more power to be generated and moved to that location.
You mean a server farm that sucks up a quarter of the power of the city of Seattle?
Correct, yes.
Wow. The person I'm talking to here is Kevin Schneider, and he helps run the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, which does research for the Department of Energy. Server farms are data centers, and these are big buildings filled with just racks and racks of computers that are basically like serving up your Netflix or whatever. I've actually got a friend who works in one of these, and his job is just to walk down these empty racks and pull out a server that's dead and put in a new one.
Wow, I bet he always gets his steps in.
Yeah, exactly. But these places are being built all over the country.
And this becomes a real problem for utilities because these can be built in a relatively short period of time, say 9 to 18 months or so. And for a utility to bring in that much new, what we call capacity, is very challenging because you have to find new generation, you have to get the power there, and it's difficult to build all of that. It takes longer than it takes for these companies to build a new server farm.
So there's really nothing stopping a tech company from building a new data center in Washington and demanding power that amounts to a quarter of what the city of Seattle needs, even if we don't have enough power to meet that demand?
Well, there is a process they have to go through. There's permits and utility connection agreements and stuff like that. But ultimately, the utility's goal is to not stand in the way. They want to figure out a way to serve their new, very large customer.
Okay, that makes sense, but I gotta say, it doesn't feel like we're very close to this future where everything is electric. Most people I know still drive gas cars, have gas furnaces, and, don't have solar panels on their roofs. So where are we in this transition? When are we actually going to be swamped with all of these new electricity needs?
2030.
Wow. Do you have an actual date?
Yeah. I mean, that's when there's a lot of smaller things that are switches that are being flipped now, just to give one example, this year home builders have to install electric heat pumps rather than natural gas heaters in their homes. But the year 2030 is when you're looking at the graphs, when it starts to be less of a gradual increase and more of a hockey stick, because the city of Seattle is getting off fossil fuels then, and then all new cars in Washington State are supposed to be off gasoline by then.
Okay, well, 2030 is only 6 years from now. We're going to need a lot more electricity a lot sooner than it seems. Could we just be better about conserving electricity?
Well, the surprising answer is no. Cutting off fossil fuels pretty much guarantees that electricity use will rise significantly, according to everybody I spoke to. Obviously, conservation will help. We can reduce power use by insulating our buildings better, taking public transit rather than driving cars. And we have plenty of incentives to do that. It's good for the planet and it saves us money. But AI is growing so quickly, its thirst for electricity could erase any collective energy savings that we achieve. You could try to use AI less, but it's almost impossible. I mean, it's wrapped up in everything from customer service call centers to Face ID on your phone. Banks are using it to detect fraud and keep your accounts secure. You can't escape it.
Wow. This is poking a lot of holes in my utopian vision for the future.
I'm not out to deflate your utopian vision. I actually think having a vision like that in our minds is important. It gives us something to strive for and to hope for. But we'll never get there if we have blinders on that prevent us from seeing the challenges ahead. And one tough realization is that our energy grid has some growing pains ahead. And when you combine climate change, which makes our hydropower less reliable, and the growth of AI and other data centers, this could spell the end of cheap power in this region, because all that competition for limited power could drive prices up.
Yeah, it seems like all of these factors are snowballing, like driving up power demands faster than we can adapt. So what happens if we don't build enough renewable energy sources to meet the demand? Will we wind up with blackouts?
That is a possibility. Blackouts are a possibility. But what's more likely is that utility companies just have to buy power on the open market, and some of that may come from coal.
From coal?
Yeah, sorry.
That sounds like a huge step backward at a time when we're supposed to be reducing our reliance on coal and other fossil fuels. There's got to be a better solution.
Yeah, and that's where the batteries come in. Again, if we're going to rely more on renewable energy sources like solar and wind, which are available at intermittent times, we're going to need a lot more batteries. And we talked about the really big battery that could fill a stadium, that could power the city of Seattle for just a few hours. That's not very realistic. But a battery doesn't have to be in one spot. You can split it up into smaller pieces. It can be like all the stars in the sky. When I was a kid, there was this cartoon called Voltron. I think they've been remaking it, actually. I'm not up to date on Voltron lore. But there were these individual robots, and they joined together to form a big robot that could fight supervillains.
Ready to form Voltron. Activate interlock. Dynatherms connected. Infracells up. Mega thrusters are go. Let's go, Voltron Force!
It's the same thing with batteries. Like, our individual car batteries could link up to become a giant battery.
I love that the name Voltron also sounds like the perfect name for a giant super battery.
Yeah, that's right. And if we're thinking about this sort of decentralized grid of car batteries all hooked together, each one of these individual car batteries contains enough energy to power a home for a couple of days. Kevin Schneider, the energy scientist, takes this idea further.
Think of the large buildings that they put in South Lake Union. Some of them have 800 or 1,000 parking spots. If you have 100 electric vehicles in there and they were all plugged in with fully charged batteries, you could probably run that building for a couple hours just off that, technically. And so the point being, these are large storage resources that they provide us some benefit, but they could do other things.
For example, imagine if whenever the demand for electricity is high, the cost goes up for electricity. And when that happens, the utility sends out a little notification to your car asking if you want to sell your power back today. So if you like the price, you leave your car at home and maybe you take the bus instead. And your car becomes part of the electrical grid for a day.
The analogy I would use is if you've heard Elon Musk talk about the value of electric vehicles and self-driving, he said they should be worth a lot more because once self-driving works properly, your car while you sleep could go out and be a taxi cab making you money. Now, I don't know if I would do that, but think about this with batteries. If your car's plugged in, it could be sitting in your garage making you money in some way.
Yeah, I don't know if I trust my car to go out and, work on the streets for itself, but it could work from home.
Yeah. But why stop with car batteries? They have a lot of limitations. They have to be lightweight and small. But a battery in your closet at home could have some of the same benefits without the limitations of size and weight. Tesla already makes batteries that you can put in your closet. They're called Tesla Powerwalls.
Oh, my mom actually has one of those. She lives in San Diego and gets way more power from her solar panels than she needs, so she sells it back to the city.
Wow, I should have interviewed her.
Yeah.
She's the perfect example. One of the advantages of a system like that is that you become part of the grid. The future of the grid is us.
That is actually very hopeful, and I'm happy that you've turned me around here because I love the idea that we could all participate in the solution.
Yeah, especially in places that have electricity buyback programs. Over time, that kind of incentive structure could train us to become more efficient users of energy by rewarding us for good behavior. Maybe it would lead us to drive less or to put on a sweater instead of turning up the thermostat, things like that.
I like that because we started out with this very difficult problem. We have to get off of fossil fuels and increase our electricity supply to meet the demands of all that electrification, not to mention AI. And it turns out that we all have a little role to play in the solution. The government can incentivize people to change their behavior and also make it easier to do things like put solar panels on your roof or batteries in your closet. Industry can innovate so that all of these new batteries are more efficient and we have a better supply of them. And as individuals, we can change our habits.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, hopefully in 6 years, we'll all have batteries in our closets, and, there will be like larger batteries that the government builds at, electrical substations and stuff.
Here's hoping. All right, coming up next, the end game.
Support comes from Kenmore Air, offering escapes to the beautiful San Juan Islands this spring. Convenient daily 45-minute flights to San Juan Island, Orcas, and Lopez Islands from only $169 per person one way. Bookings available now at kenmoreair.com. Support comes from Pacific Science Center, celebrating spring at PacSci with butterflies at the Tropical Butterfly House, sea creatures in the saltwater tide pool, and Jane Goodall, Reasons for Hope at the IMAX Theater, a journey around the globe to share good news stories. Learn more at pacsci.org.
This is the sound of a city that's gone mostly electric. Really, the only thing you hear anymore is people honking their horns.
All right, it's time for the end game. And once again, we have Lucy Suchek, our brilliant producer, here to present it.
Yeah, so this is going to be kind of like a trivia game. I have some questions about batteries, questions about electricity and energy. And I just want to quiz you guys and see what you know.
See if we're just full of hot air, that we actually don't know this at all.
Yeah. Okay, so the first trivia question. What year were batteries invented?
Oh, God. I think
this is a hard one.
Joshua's going to win this game.
I don't know the answer to this question. I could guess. But
1862.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so it's probably after, Thomas Edison and the whole light bulb thing.
Okay, wait. Point of order. Joshua used this really interesting metaphor when we were prepping for this show about how a dam is basically a battery. So by that logic.
Right, yeah, because you've got all this water stored behind it, and it's just like potential energy, and you can release it when you need it.
Yeah, to get this question right, you have to really kind of think outside of the box for what a battery is.
How about, okay, if we're going to do that, then you could include Swiss cuckoo clocks,
Wow.
which a weight descending down like a chain in a cuckoo clock is a kind of battery because it's releasing that energy slowly over time. So.
Or do we even have to be mechanical? Like, couldn't the human body be considered a battery?
God. Oh my God, Benna, too far.
We're just completely obfuscating the fact that we don't know the answer to this question.
Okay, Monica said 1860 something.
I did. I said 1862 out of nowhere.
Joshua, what's your year?
I don't know. It's got to be some early thing. I'm going to go way early. 1815.
You were very close. 1800.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah.
We were both in the right century.
Yeah, I'm surprised. So it was invented by someone named Alessandro Volta.
Oh, Volta.
Yeah, Volta.
Like Voltron.
Yeah, like from your TV show thing. And it was called a voltaic pile. It was pairs of copper and zinc discs piled up on top of each other, separated by a cloth soaked in salty water.
Huh.
Wow.
Don't ask me how that worked because I have no idea, but that was the first battery.
All right. Can we call that one a tie?
Yeah, we'll call it a tie, except that Joshua gets like a little bit more extra points.
He has 1.5.
Yeah. Okay, I have two more trivia questions. In which state in the U.S. does electricity cost the most?
Hawaii.
Oh my God, how did you know that?
I was thinking about the resources across different states.
Ding, ding, smart.
Yeah, that is smart. I mean, I was going to have to start whittling away places where we know that it is cheap, like Washington State and then somewhere near the Tennessee Valley Authority, which has a bunch of other hydropower,
Yeah.
But Monica, that was brilliant.
Well, that's what I was thinking about too. At first I was like maybe the Midwest, but they probably got a lot of wind power. The Southwest has a lot of solar. Hawaii.
Yes. So Hawaii is the most expensive. It costs 40 cents per kilowatt hour. Guess which state is the least expensive?
Well, I don't know. I'm going to guess Washington.
I'm going to guess Texas.
Okay, Washington is very close, but it's actually Wyoming.
Oh.
Yeah, 8 cents per kilowatt. And then Washington is 9 cents, so it's down there. Okay, final question. In our U.S. homes, on average, what uses the most electricity? Like what appliance, what thing that we do in our homes uses the most electricity?
Do you have a guess, Joshua?
Well, I assume it's like the building envelope itself, keeping us warm or cool inside the building.
I think it's the dryer.
It's the air conditioner.
Oh, but not everyone has an air conditioner.
But still, on average, that's what uses the most electricity, even if not everyone has one.
Yeah. And then we have heat pumps, which are more efficient, but still, I mean, oftentimes in like energy conversations, people say like the built environment, that's where like we use a lot of our energy for our buildings.
Yeah.
And in office towers, it's to keep them cool because you got a lot of bodies, you got a lot of computers in there, and sometimes even in the winter, you have to keep them cool.
Yeah. So on average, an AC would use like 3 kilowatts per hour. Keep that number in your head. This is kind of hard because it's numbers and units and all of that. 3 kilowatts per hour. Knowing that, guess how much electricity it takes to run your fridge for a month.
What?
I bet it takes a lot less, like 0.5 kilowatt hours, because like it's a much smaller space. It's very well insulated, and it's a closed door. You don't have leaky spots where the air can get out like you do.
0.5 kilowatt hours per month?
Yeah, that's what I guessed.
Okay.
I don't know, 5?
It's 54.
Okay.
54 kilowatt hours per month. Because think about it, 3 kilowatt hours per hour for your AC.
Okay.
It's per month. So that's like, what, hundreds of hours? Like thousands of hours, maybe?
I don't know. It just shows that I'm making stuff up.
Well, obviously, we have no idea how much power anything that we use requires. And we have both been reporting on this for weeks. So probably a good lesson for us, but also for the broader us, that we should be paying attention to electricity, especially in this new era when we're going to need a lot more of it and need it to be more efficient, and what things actually cost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think we have to know the numbers for all these things to be good citizens of the world,
But it's true. Like, I don't know. I use my fridge every day. I turn on my AC when I'm hot, and I'm not really thinking that hard about how much energy I'm using. So it's good to keep in mind.
Do you have a question about the economy? Email us at booming@kuow.org.
And as always, a special thanks to all you listeners out there who financially support KUOW. We're trying something new with this podcast, a new way to bring you the news. So when you show that support, it just encourages this kind of thing. If you want to help out, go to kuow.org/donate/booming. Thank you.
That's it for Booming. Our producers are Lucy Suchek and Whitney Henry Lester. Our editor is Carol Smith.
I'm Joshua McNichols.
I'm Monica Nicholsberg.
And we'll catch you next time.
Hi, it's Terry Gross, the host of Fresh Air. We bring you in-depth, long-form interviews with actors, directors, musicians, authors, journalists, and more. Listen to our Peabody Award-winning Fresh Air podcast from WHYY and NPR.